So let's talk about a war you've probably never heard of, but one that absolutely changed the map of Africa. We're diving into the Ogaden War. It was this incredibly brutal conflict with roots going back decades, and it ended up becoming a full-blown proxy battle for the Cold War superpowers. It's a fascinating and tragic story. Okay, so picture this. It's the middle of the night, July 13th, 1977. We're in the Ogaden, this huge, dry patch of land in eastern Ethiopia that's home mostly to ethnic Somalis. It's quiet now, but a storm is brewing that's about to reshape the entire region.
And then, bam, Somali tanks just pour across the border. It's this massive, coordinated invasion. Their goal? To capture the Ogaden and finally make this dream of a greater Somalia a reality. The war is officially on.
But hang on, how did we get here? An invasion like this doesn't just happen out of the blue. To really get it, we need to rewind the clock a bit and look at how these borders, the very lines on the map, were drawn in the first place. You know what's so wild about this is you've got two different histories colliding. While European powers are busy carving up Africa, Ethiopia actually manages to fight them off. They beat Italy, which was a huge deal, and they start building their own empire, grabbing the Ogaden in the process. Then, treaties with the British and Italians made those borders official, splitting traditional Somali clan lands and basically planting a ticking time bomb. So when Somalia gets its independence in 1960, this border issue isn't just a disagreement, it's a deep, open wound. And that brings us to this key idea, irredentism. It's a fancy word, but it's simple, really. It's the powerful belief that you have to reclaim land that you feel is rightfully yours, either because of history or because your people live there. For the brand new nation of Somalia, the Ogaden wasn't just some piece of Ethiopia. No, it was a lost part of their homeland that they had to get back. And get this, their ambition was literally written on their flag. That five-pointed star wasn't just a cool design, it was a map of their intentions. Think of it like a to-do list. 2 points for the parts that had already united to form Somalia, and the other 3, well, those were for the lands they still planned to claim, including, you guessed it, the Ogaden in Ethiopia.
So, you've got this burning ambition in Somalia. But, a dream isn't enough to start a war. You need an opportunity, a perfect moment to strike. And in the mid-1970s, boy, did they get one, thanks to the very different paths Ethiopia and Somalia were on. It was a tale of two countries. On one side, Ethiopia was in absolute chaos. Its ancient monarchy had been overthrown by this brutal military junta called the Derg. They were in the middle of the Red Terror, a bloody purge of anyone they saw as an enemy. The Ethiopian military was demoralized and falling apart. Meanwhile, across the border, you had Somalia, led by its dictator Siad Barre. It was stable, fired up with nationalism, and, thanks to the Soviets, had built one of the strongest armies in Africa. Somalia looked at the chaos in Ethiopia and saw a golden opportunity.
And just when you think this is a simple regional squabble, nope, this is where the whole thing gets tangled up in the global Cold War. The Horn of Africa is about to become a chessboard for the US and the Soviet Union. Before the war, things were pretty straightforward. The United States had been friends with Ethiopia's monarchy for a long time, and the Soviet Union, they had poured a ton of money and weapons into Somalia, making it their main socialist ally in the region. Simple, right? Well, hold on, because the script is about to get completely flipped. When that new junta in Ethiopia declared itself Marxist, the Soviets saw a much bigger prize and cut a military deal with them. Suddenly, Moscow is backing two countries that absolutely hate each other. Their solution? They try to get them to form a socialist federation. But there was no way Somalia was giving up its dream of conquering the Ogaden. So feeling totally betrayed by Moscow, Somalia does something stunning. They turn to the US for help. But this is where Somalia made a huge miscalculation. The US, led by President Jimmy Carter, was still haunted by Vietnam and did not want to get dragged into another messy conflict. Carter basically said, "We'll give you some economic aid, but no weapons. We're not getting into a fight with the Soviets over this." Somalia, though, heard that diplomatic talk and somehow thought it was a green light to invade. And for a minute there, it looked like their massive gamble was going to pay off. They completely ignored the warnings from the Soviets and just stormed into the Ogaden. And their attack was so fast, so effective, that within just a couple of months, they had captured a staggering 90% of the entire region. This is the moment the Soviet Union finally picked a side. They condemned Somalia's invasion, cut them off completely, and then launched one of the biggest military airlifts in history
to help Ethiopia. And just look at these numbers. We're talking 15,000 Cuban combat troops, thousands of Soviet advisors, and hundreds upon hundreds of tanks and jets. It was a tidal wave of military power, all coming to turn the tide of the war.
So, while Somalia was getting ready to face this brand new, supercharged army, they looked around for help and found nothing. No one. By invading another country and crossing an international border, the whole world saw them as the bad guy. The US and everyone else backed away, leaving Somalia totally alone.
Against the reorganized Ethiopian army, now backed by all that Cuban and Soviet firepower, the Somali forces just collapsed. Only 8 months after it all began, Siad Barre had no choice but to order a full retreat. The conventional war was over. Somalia had lost, badly.
But the story doesn't end there, not by a long shot. The defeat in the Ogaden would send shockwaves through Somalia. And the consequences, well, they're still being felt to this very day. First, just look at the human cost. It was immense. In just 8 short months of fighting, we're talking about an estimated 60,000 people killed. And what's truly heartbreaking when you look at this chart is that the biggest group of victims weren't soldiers. They were civilians, people just caught in the middle. And beyond this staggering death toll, the war created a massive humanitarian crisis. 600,000 people. That's how many were forced to flee their homes, becoming refugees in their own region, just trying to escape the violence. For Somalia as a nation, the fallout was an absolute catastrophe. That unifying dream of Greater Somalia, it wasn't just defeated, it was shattered. The nationalism that held the country together just dissolved, and society fractured right back along old clan lines. The defeat led to economic collapse, public anger, and then Ethiopia started backing rebel groups against the government. It was the beginning of a downward spiral that would lead directly to a horrific civil war and the total collapse of the Somali state. And that leaves us with this final, really tough question. Was the tragic fate of Somalia just